A Little Yuletide Murder, Chapter 10. I was up early the next morning and feeling remarkably refreshed, considering the late hour I'd gone to bed. Maybe it was the weather, the sun was shining brightly, and the sky was deep unblemished blue. A perfect morning for a brisk walk, I thought as I prepared a simple breakfast and took a shower. A half hour later, dressed in my favorite sweatsuit worn over a sweater, a scarf to keep my ears warm, and a new pair of expensive sneakers on my feet. Why are sneakers so expensive these days? I headed out the front door and for town, because I'm as much a creature of habit as anyone else. I usually find my walks taking me in the same direction each time. Sometimes when I think of it, I altered my route, if only to enjoy different scenery. But this morning, I didn't bother being creative in choosing what streets to take. The only thing on my mind was to get moving, breathe in the cold, crisp air, and feel my blood flowing. It takes only 10 minutes to reach the center of Kaboot Cove from my house. When I arrived there, I glanced at my watch. It was 7:30. Even at that early hour, the main street, amply named Main Street, was bustling. That is one of the reasons I enjoy taking morning walks into town. It's a chance to see friends before they become immense in their work and daily lives. I bumped into Sandy and Bernadette, who owned the Animal Inn, a wonderful kennel where dogs and cats placed in their loving charge are treated royally. "How are all your canine and feline boarders?" I asked. "Making the usual racket," said Sandy. "I think they sense Christmas is coming." To watch Bernadette add, "A house full, no vacancies. Full house, no vacancies. Not an empty run in the place, and looks like it will stay that way right through the new year. That's called prosperity," I said. "I suppose you're right, Jess," Sandy said. "We've been turning down callers from miles away who want to bring their pets with them to the festival. Hate to say no, but..." I traveled another half block when I was stopped by Mickey and Joan Tesgeny on their way to open up their sign shop. "Keeping busy?" I asked. "With the Christmas festival coming up?" Mickey said, laughing. "Can't keep up with all the signs the festival committees keeps ordering. You?" "Not very busy at all," I said, and loving every minute of it. The only problem with running into so many people on my walk is that it interrupts the rhythm I try to establish, one that will benefit my cardiovascular system. I eventually left the downtown area and headed for the waterfront. The smell of sea air was bracing, the sound of gulls overhead providing what almost sounded like a choir. Were they singing a Christmas song? I smiled at the thought. The wind off, the water was brisk, and I soon regretted not having dressed more warmly, perhaps adding a jacket over my sweatsuit. People were going in and out of Mara's luncheonette, but I resisted the temptation to stop in for a cup of coffee and whatever caloric breakfast pastry she'd come up with that morning. After pausing on the dock to take in a stunning vista of sky and water, I went to the shore, removed my sneakers and socks, and walked barefoot along the water's edge. The sand was surprisingly warm on my bare feet, at least below the surface. Many people were on the beach, some throwing sticks for their dogs to fetch, others walking hand in hand. A man combed the sand with a metal detector in search of buried treasure. The sound of children's laughter rose above the steady slap and swish of waves breaking on shore. At first I wasn't sure I heard correctly. Had someone called my name? When I heard it a second time, I stopped and turned. Tom Coleman, Sheriff Mexico's deputy, was waving to me from where the sand ended at a series of large boulders, behind which was a parking lot. "Good morning, Tom," I said when I reached him. "Beautiful day for December." "Yes, ma'am, I suppose it is," he said. "The sheriff's been looking for you." "Looking for me? Why?" "Has to do with Jake Welker, I think." "How so?" I asked, sitting on a rock, brushing the sand from my feet and between my toes, and putting on my socks and sneakers. He didn't really say, Mrs. Fletcher, except that Mrs. Walther is at headquarters. I think she's looking for you too. Has something bad happened? I asked. My car is right up here, was his reply. I accepted his hand to help me up onto the rocks and followed him to the police cruiser. 5 minutes later, I was in Sheriff Mort Metzger's office. Mary Welter stood by the window, her back to me. Good morning, I said. Good morning, Mrs. F., said Mort. Good morning, Mary, I said. She turned and looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. What's the matter? I asked. I assumed there must be something important to have sent Tom down to the beach to interrupt my morning constitutional. When Mary didn't respond, Mort said, I arrested Jake this morning for Roy Brent's murder, Mrs. F. Mary bit her lip and turned away again. What happened? I asked. I thought Jake had an alibi. When neither of them responded, I added, Didn't Dennis say he was fixing a stone wall with Jake the morning Roy was killed? That's what he said the first time, Mrs. F. But I had my suspicions. So I went out there first thing this morning and talked to him again. Seems he changed the story. He wasn't with Jake that morning? Afraid not. Dennis says Jake told him to come up with that story so he would have an alibi. But after a little prodding, I got the truth out of him. I thought of Tony Colorado's comment that Dennis would testify to anything, depending upon who was more persuasive. Was that the case here? Had Mort led Dennis to this total turnabout in his story? Mary turned again, faced me. I'm afraid Dennis is telling the truth this time, Mrs. Fletcher. Please, it's Jessica. Jessica, he confided in me that he told the sheriff he'd been with Jake that morning, only because he was afraid of Jake. No, Dennis was not with Jake when Roy Brent was killed. I know that for a fact. After all, he is my brother. But such a drastic change in story, I said, exhaling loudly. And why would he be afraid of Jake? He's lived with you and Jake on the farm for many years. I know, said Mary, slowly shaking her head and sinking into a chair. But just because Dennis wasn't with Jake, that doesn't mean Jake killed Rory. Having stated that seemed to perk her up. She sat forward and looked at Mort. It doesn't necessarily mean that, does it, Sheriff Metzger? I mean, just because he wasn't with Jake doesn't mean Jake killed anyone. I suppose that's what a jury would have to decide, Mrs. Walther, Mort said glumly. All I know is I have enough to hold Jake on suspension of murder until the DA decides whether to indict. Where is Jake? I asked. In jail, Mort asked. Why did you send for me? I asked. Because I asked him to, Mary answered. I don't know, Jessica, but sometimes I think you're the only real friend I have. Her comment struck me as strange. Although we had been friendly, we'd never socialized the way true friends do. Only interacted through mutual involvement in community activities. To call her her only friend was in my judgment a gross exaggeration. Still, my heart went out to her. If she viewed me that way, it meant she harbored a terrible distrust of everyone else she got to know over the years. Mary, what would you like me to do? I asked. How can I help? Mort answered for her. Jake's going to need a lawyer, Mrs. F. I told Mary that we could get him a public defender, but she said she wanted to talk to you first. Talk to me about lawyers, I said. Because you seem to be the one person in Kabuka that everyone looks up to, Jessica, Mary said, and I know you understand something about the legal system because of the books you write, because maybe I was out of place. I shouldn't have bothered you, it isn't your concern. I pulled up a chair and patted her hand. Mary, you haven't bothered me at all. I want to help. Mort is right. If you don't have the money to hire a lawyer, the state will provide a public defender. But that would be someone I don't know, that Jake doesn't even know. We don't have the money to pay an expensive lawyer, but I have some cash saved. Not a great deal, but maybe enough to use as a down payment. I could pay off a lawyer's fee over time. Jessica, all I want to help. All I want is to help Jake because I know he did not do this. He did not kill Roy Brent. Her voice had risen in volume, causing me to sit back as though pushed by a hand. I looked to Morton, who continued to sit behind his desk, hands folded beneath his chin, eyes narrow, as he took in the conversation. What about Joe Toko? I said. Who is he? Mary asked. A wonderful young attorney who moved here only 6 months ago. He's a fine young man with excellent legal training, studied law in New Hampshire and New York City. Oxford, too, I think. Oxford, England? Maud asked. Yes, he'd been practicing in Manhattan and handling cases in New Hampshire, too. He's moved here because he likes to fish and wants a more quiet life than in Manhattan. He's building his practice. Would you like me to talk to him? See what he would charge to defend Jake? Yes, of course, Mary said. It might not even involve much legal reputation. I offered. As of now, Jake hasn't been indicted. I turned to Moore. That's correct, isn't it? Aye, he said. If Joe Turkey was willing to take the case, he can handle this phase of things. Maybe see that Jake is released on bail. Something like that. I really don't know because I'm not a lawyer. But I have a lot of faith in this young attorney who is now a member of our community, and I'd be happy to speak with him. I'll go see him when I leave here. Mort said, I'm not much of a fan of attorneys, as everybody knows, but have got to admit I'm impressed with this young fella, Turco fella. Got a nice way about him, which I can't say about most lawyers. It's a good suggestion Jessica is making, Mrs. Walter. I stood. Unless you want me here for something else, I'll go look him up right away. Mary too stood and took both my hands in her large ones. God bless you, Jessica, she said. I knew I could count on you. I don't know what I would do without you. Again, this expression of friendship made me uncomfortable, although I understood that she was doing everything she could do to express her gratitude. I hadn't done anything yet, but I did feel my suggestion about Joseph Turco was a good one. What a terrible situation for everyone to be in. I thought as I picked up my scarf from where I laid it on the edge of Mort's desk and wrapped it around my neck. I said to Mary, will you be home after you leave here? Yes, I have nowhere else to go. Don't give up hope, Mary, I said. I'm sure things will work out. Like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Bye.